All right, we welcome the public to the Waunakee Community School District Co-Curricular Committee. Co-curricular activities are voluntary school-sponsored programs that largely occur outside the traditional instructional day. Co-curricular activities are purposeful and complement academic programming occurring beyond the traditional classroom. The Waunakee Community School District is committed to providing our students the opportunity to fully participate in curricular, extracurricular, student services, recreational and other programs or activities without impairment related to a student's race, religion, national origin, color, status, marital and parental status, sexual orientation, gender identity, physical, mental, emotional, and learning disability, or handicap. My pleasure to call this co-curricular meeting to order. Roll call. The committee members are in attendance. 3 board members, Dave Fetcher, Mark Petzel, and myself as chair. Also in attendance is Randy Goodberg, the superintendent at Waunakee Community School District, Brian Borowski, high school principal, and Aaron May, athletic director.
And Mr. Keenest, the middle school principal.
Thank you. Can I get an approval of the current agenda?
So approve, motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Do have a few public comments this morning or this afternoon. Feels like morning. First one will be M. Meyer regarding the mountain biking coaching position. Yep. You'll have 3 minutes and I'll keep the time. I'll just let you know.
Thank you. Well, thanks all of you. It's been about, oh gosh, 8 months since I think we saw you last, and you approved the mountain biking team as an official school-sponsored club. We couldn't imagine at that time what it would grow to be. You probably saw the letter that we sent to you via the agenda. We had 43 athletes participate in the first year of its existence, which is beyond what we imagined. So we had an incredibly successful season. We continue to hear interest from families throughout the district all the way through October, which was the last month of our season. So very popular often in its first year. As you know, mountain biking provides an alternative sport for students in a school where traditional stick and ball or team sports have always dominated. The majority of our thoughts, like I said, are outlined in the letter we provided to you. But one thing to note is the board policy that we're the board policy that we are asking for an exemption from was established and asks that an activity be in the school for 3 years before a paid coach or advisor position is granted. I wanted to make note that the mountain biking team became an official school-sponsored sport last spring. However, it has been in existence for 5 years and has had Waunakee athletes participating all 5 years. So if that's any merit for its staying power, I think that kind of speaks for itself. I do believe the policy, if I'm understanding it correctly, as it's been explained to me, was created to ensure that the activity had staying power or that students maintained interest in the activity throughout its tenure at the school over the course of 3 years. However, I think the incredible growth and the interest in the first year of the sport proves that it has staying power. So as noted in the letter from John and I, we expect even more growth for the team next year. In fact, you were communicating with the Wisconsin League, and they stated that they were seeing about 45% growth across teams every year. So I'll let you guys do the math. We had 43 athletes last year. We expect even more next year. The presence of the team so far has cost the school nothing. We have no use of facilities, no use of equipment, no transportation, as we can't provide it in our regular school buses.
30 seconds.
So if the committee has follow-up questions, feel free to ask John or I, but we really want to offer this as a category A sport for the kids. We simply don't think it's a realistic endeavor unless there's also a paid coaching position that accompanies that, considering the complexities of running a team with 4 dozen athletes across 3 schools. So
And you're sticking around, right? So if we have any
yes,
questions.
I can. Yep,
Those are for your discussion. Okay.
happy to.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Henry White. You guys decide which one you want.
Yeah.
Also regarding the mountain bike team.
Good evening. My name is Henry White. My son Henry behind me. I knew nothing about my mountain bike club team or anything like that before Henry joined last year. He had some interest in biking. Once he got into, saw how competitive, how fun, met kids from around the state. Through the mountain bike club, he went to a camp up north, met more kids. And it's so different from any sport I ever did, my wife did growing up. Emily mentioned the football, the soccer, the baseball, anything, rowing, a little bit of everything. Mountain biking, and it might sound corny, but it's unbelievable. Whether you're first place or last place, you get cheered on. Doesn't matter what club you're from, what team. And so that's what I'm hoping that it'll continue. Henry learned so much in the first year and a half, 2 years, that he ended up doing very well in a couple of races towards this year that was sponsored by NICA. And again, I know nothing about the sport itself, except it's fun to watch. It's unbelievable positive for the kids, for the families. And I'm just hoping that you guys will take into consideration that it's going to grow. It does need help, with the funding for a coach. And that's all that I ask. You guys won't be disappointed with how positive the last race of the year was Trek, and it was unbelievable experience. And again, it sounds corny, but just how positive it was. There were people that were camping. There was movie nights for the kids. And again, whether you're first or last, the cheering was there. It was just an excellent time. So I'm hoping you take into consideration that it will be a sport for Waunakee. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, Henry, you're up. 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Henry White. I've done soccer all my life, but last year I decided to try mountain biking, and I've met tons of coaches and kids, and all of them have been super positive, and I love them all. I've learned a lot about taking care of my bike, doing trail maintenance, and just everything around it. I got 4th place a couple weeks ago in the state race, and I plan on continuing the sport for all the years on I have. I believe it would be a good sport for Waunakee to have and to let the kids have another choice in what they want to do.
What grade are you in?
7th.
7th, all right.
Thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you.
Okay, so after public comments, we've got Aaron. Go directly here. Changes, additions to the co-curricular offerings.
Yeah, so if you look at that, the memo I wrote, I've got a couple different changes there proposed, and the first one just on the list is a drama reorganization proposal. Mr. Braun is here. Mr. Braun has been the drama person for the last 25 years? 33 years. That was a little. But basically, our drama positions and our drama organization has not changed significantly since 1975. In the 90s, we did add an assistant director position. But if you look at the population and the makeup of Waunakee High School student body in the 1990s versus 2021, it's very different. We have a lot more demand for performing arts outlets. And so what we're asking here is, one, to add a winter play and to add additional positions to help actually support those programs. These are positions and jobs that have been currently either done voluntarily by volunteers, community volunteers, people that Rick has just from his connections in the drama community, the theater community, and or we paid for out of basically the box office incoming cash, where we've given some money back that way to them or to cover any materials or purchases they need to make that way. So what we're really looking to do is to progress the drama department forward, especially as our high school continues to grow. And Brian mentioned last night, we were almost to 1,400 students in the high school. triple the size almost of when Rick took over, and his drama offerings and positions have not really changed in that time. So that's the first sort of co-curricular change we're proposing. My recommendation, Brian Borowski and Brian Gabarski, we also all met with Rick back in September to discuss these. I believe, I want to put words in everybody's mouth, but we would support these changes. And realize there is a budgetary impact. I've kind of estimated the budgetary impact below. But that would be our recommendation to this subcommittee.
Would that be effective for this year, Aaron, or for some?
For the 22-23,
So for the next school year, so the budgetary impact would then will forward into the budget.
all of these would be for changes for 22-23.
Due to the budgetary impact, I would prefer if we actually went through all of them to see the total amount and where that funding is coming from before we, I hate to sit there and think that we're gonna approve budget for one at a time, not seeing the cumulative effect and where that money is gonna come out of whose budget next year. If we have an estimate on that, if that makes sense.
Fair enough. So if we want to scroll down to the next one. That is the mountain biking club. Moving that from a category C to a category A activity that comes from, as Emily mentioned, back 8-10 months ago, when it was first approved, there was a wish from the board members to revisit it in a year and move it from a club to potentially a category A, which is our competitive sports category, I would call that. Met with Emily and Ms. Meyer and Ms. Kramer, just to go over what the changes are in terms of oversight that come from moving from C to A. I did put in there as a position statement from myself, Mr. Borowski, and talking to Mr. Gabarski, would recommend for approval the following two conditions. Create a carve out in the school board policy to allow for competition on Sundays, similar to the carve out we have for ski and snowboard competing on Wednesday nights. If you notice in our board policy about the Sundays and Wednesdays, it already states that the superintendent can give exceptions, but we just have a standing exception for ski and snowboard. So I'm not asking Randy every year or every week for permission to have ski team on Wednesdays. So there, that part, and then I have in there, you've heard a different position, but to stay consistent with equestrian team, support the proposal at the high school level only. And as Ms. Meyer, Mr. Kramer had talked about in the letter in there, right now the policy for new clubs, new orgs has to be sponsored for 3 years prior to a paid position. So that's why I do not have that in this current recommendation. But that I think would be something you guys would have to discuss, because I can't make changes to policy.
And I think one thing for the board to consider is a lot of times we use that 3-year piece. I'm not sure if it's written in policy specifically or if it's kind of part of just a practice in our form that we've had as we move forward. But I think it's a piece to look at it as far as adding a sport, a competitive sport, and particularly a category A sport, versus adding a club like the Euchre Club, which is types of things that also come forward where that are definitely driven as interest clubs, and we don't do like a paid advisor unless those become to a point in time where they are sustainable. So that's something different to consider as you're looking at this one. Is if it does become more of that competitive piece as you're looking at with category A, there could be a reason to look at the cost structure of that differently.
The next two I've got.
Just a second here.
Oh, sorry.
So even though that they were sponsored this past year, the club, then there was history of this club for years prior,
It existed outside of school sponsorship.
outside
Prior
of
to
school
that, yeah.
sponsorship. And
Similar to how the equestrian team was in existence before we took on.
and participation was,
Competing, they just weren't competing under our umbrella.
right. And the participation was high during those years as well.
For mountain bike club?
Yeah.
That would be a question I would have to direct to John.
It's been growing within the last 5 years that I've been involved with it. We're based over in Middleton, right? So we've grown the numbers that M stated were pretty correct, with 50% every year. When I started, there were 12 kids, and now we had 103 last year. So
And how many at the high school?
We had 15 students at the high school level, I believe. But we had, let's see, I think we started with like 5 student athletes the first year that it was in existence, the whole mountain biking club. And then, like I said, it's grown now. We have 43 students from Waunakee alone and 112 from all 3 teams in our cooperative.
Do other schools participate from middle school to high school?
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly, 6 through 12.
And so what your recommendation would be just to do it to high school? So explain to me the difference between just doing that compared to doing the whole group.
Sure, so, but like it states in there, I'm just trying to mirror it after what we did with the equestrian team, which was a similar thing where it existed prior to us taking it on as a sponsored activity. At that time, the board's desire was just to sponsor it at the high school level for lettering and those type of things. So that's what I'm using as sort of the template for this recommendation.
Right now it operates as a club, and it also allows 6th grade through 12th.
6th through 12th graders.
So is your proposal, Aaron, to kind of limit the 6th through 8th grade then, or would there still be the ability for them to?
They would
be
still
part of
part.
it, they're just not part of the category 8 aspect.
Yes, correct. About in terms of our oversight and those type of things in terms of emergency contact information, sports physicals, co-curricular code. Same way with the equestrian team. We only apply those rules to the high school athletes. There are middle school kids that also compete sort of under the umbrella, but they're not tied to us in that same way. Same with ski and snowboard. 7th and 8th graders can sign up and compete and race in that league, but they don't have the same sort of a formal attachment to the school that way.
And we also carry like a liability insurance for the kids that we sponsor that fall into that. So we would have
Coverage is for all of our programs.
Yeah.
If we approve them here, we're covered through our liability.
even through the 6th, 7th, 8th.
You know,
If
If
we
you
don't
would,
include,
if you would approve it that way, yes. But then part of that requires us then to have things like sports physicals,
Mhm.
emergency contact. It also ups our risk management tasks within the.
So right now, they're as a category C, correct?
Yep.
So we don't collect any of those pieces. So in essence, what you're saying is that they could still operate as a category C at that lower level, but then it'd be a category A at the high school, is what you're really different.
Yeah. So that.
So I hate to ask this question, but, and because the whole thing sounds really great. You know, it's nice. Alternative sporting activities. That carry beyond high school and so all that's great stuff. Did you calculate the cost it's going to be to make this transition?
Well, right now with the transition that we're proposing, it's still a very fairly minimal cost because we're like they stated, you know, we don't provide transportation. If we're not paying for a coach, our cost really is coming from liability coverages, administrative coverage, basic awards, things like that, supplies. So there's not a significant, in the format that I have it recommended, there is almost a negligible impact on the budget.
Okay.
If we had the coach though, you're looking around, what, 1,300, 1,500?
Yeah, I mean, that would be, I think, a discussion I would have to have with maybe Brian Grabarski and see what an appropriate stipend would be for that position, what percentages we would be looking at. But yeah, I would assume it would be 15 to 18, somewhere in there.
It'd be, it would, I would say the equitable way to place that would be within the same parameters that the ski and snowboard club and the equine team are, which would put you between almost $1,300 and almost $2,200.
But that would go against what our current policy says about having to wait 3 years, because I don't think there's a carve out for any different type of
I
activity.
don't
It just
think
says
there's
3
really a
years.
carve out, and so I think that's. When I take a look at I think the 3-year piece was a piece that we kind of, that has been around for, been a historical piece more than a hard policy piece, Dave. I think it was a piece that kind of came through this committee over the years, as we saw many different clubs being kind of recommended, and then you see some that would last for a year because they were interested, and then the interest would wane, and by year 3, they didn't exist anymore. I think you can look at, I think particularly as you look at kind of the competition piece of this, I think that differentiates it a little bit from like a lot of the other clubs that come through here, which are more service clubs or interest level clubs at the high school. This is kind of, in my mind, kind of adding an additional sport to our docket, which I think brings a different level of maybe responsibility as far as wanting to have somebody there who's so I don't think you would have to, in my mind at least, stick with that 3 years, given the consideration of moving into category A, particularly at the high school.
Would this would apply, this is a fall sport, so this would apply to next school year, correct?
Right.
So if we wanted to, we could go ahead and actually change the policy over the next several months to make a difference between like a category A versus C or something like that. Change the policy so that we're good into the future too.
Sure.
And then go ahead and we won't even have to have a discussion about paying a coach next year, because it would automatically happen if we change policy to say that. And then we don't have to worry
And I
about
think
it.
we can review that policy to make sure that's kind of clear, because I don't think it's specifically written in policy. It's been more of a
Right.
procedural piece that the board has stuck to. So, yeah. we
it's
can-
in
But if we
but-
did it that
but-
way, we wouldn't have to worry about.
But
it
I
in the
see a
future.
difference with just moving into category A and more of a competitive sport versus a social club at the high school or an interest club at the high school. It's a little bit different in my mind.
It's written into 370 Rule 4, so that's where it's from. So
What's that?
policy 370 Rule 4, that's where it's that
That's what
that 3-year piece is written.
But I
And that's the document, the
That's-
form
that's
that they
the form.
do. Submit for
Because
changes.
you have the policy, then you have an associated form that goes with it. That was a change made to the form a number of years ago. But we don't differentiate that form out for a new sport or a new club. So I think that would be something, Dave, per year kind of thoughts that we could definitely consider.
Yeah, and that's where once we began talking about this, we've got other things going to policy too. And I think this is something that, I'm all for co-curriculars that provide opportunities for one kid. And this seems like it's going to survive. I know it's been big in my 2 sons, and so, and on college campuses and stuff, this is going to continue forever. So I don't know how we want to proceed. If we want to wait till policy, do we want to?
Well, this is just deciding if it's A or C. So I'm not sure that the policy won't have any impact on it, but then we could use the policy part to then deal with the paid staff with the idea of, I would think probably most people would support that category A should almost have a paid coach right away due to the nature of it. But obviously that's something for the whole board to decide, but this is a separate issue, I think. So I would make a motion to recommend that we move the mountain biking club for high school with the carve out on the dates from category C to category A.
And you'd also just ask that the policy committee review this.
And a policy
Yeah.
committee take a look at
Sure.
determining when paid staff should be done.
This is not limiting the younger kids. They're still
They're in
participants
C.
and active. They can do it. It's just for awards and recognition. So,
Category A puts you into that spot though where you can be drug tested, your grades count, behavior counts, attendance counts. So anybody in category A at this point, that if you make that move, then if they're absent a day, they can't compete over the weekend, or if there's behavior issue, they can't compete. If their grades aren't good, they can't compete. So it does put some restrictions on the high school kids where right now it's open and we're not applying those
How many events would that Sunday carve out affect? So if we said no to that, how many events would that affect during the course of your season?
That would affect every
All of
race in our season.
All of them?
They're all held on Sundays.
My only concern is, what if volleyball wants to do this, and then some other, we've set precedent, so I think we'd have to be willing to go along with it, but
I think we already have the precedent set. We already have it set with snow and ski board.
okay.
Ski boards. Snowboards. Snowboard and ski team. There we go. I think we already have that as far as some of the carve out pieces. So I don't have a concern with that. I think that's a piece that it just has to be articulated as that's part of when they compete. I mean, it's part of what that structure looks like. And it's similar to being equestrian is usually on the weekends. It's travel and some other things. So I think it's just one of those things that if you want to participate, that's part of what the option is.
Part of that too is, with some of these places, when you don't control the location, you can't really also pick the dates. So that's part of the ski and snowboard is Wednesday is the day the mountain will let us have races. So that's the day we race. That's kind of how it goes.
Okay. So the motion is to pass this on to the full board with the carve outs then. And I would second that.
All in favor of moving mountain bike club from category C to A for high school? And then also moving this to policy committee, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right. We will take that up at full board.
All right, the next one is middle school dance and cheer positions. These have been around now for 3 years. They're still, they've been, well, you can kind of see the numbers there. Last year was a bit of an anomaly because there was a lot of uncertainty about what was going on with different things. But I think we have some proof of some staying power there. So I'm recommending that we add paid positions at the middle school. One position for cheerleading coach, one position for a middle school dance coach. The percentages there would be, you can see the percentages below at the salary ranges where that would be. I'm recommending for approval. Both these positions have, like I said, they started out in 1920. They've really helped become kind of a feeder program to our high school programs. High school cheer has, I think, grown, gotten more popular. Football cheer, at least, stronger over the last few years. And I think bringing some of these kids along has been part of that reason.
So would the cheer portion, are they part of do they cheer for the football program?
Yep, so this is similar to the high school football cheer position. They cheer just the home games for middle school, 7th and 8th grade. So
Okay.
1 week it's the 7th grade teams that are home, they're cheering at those games, and then the following week it's the 8th grade games. So they basically they mirror the high school in terms of doing the football season cheering.
And then do they compete in the cheer activities like the high school team does or not?
No,
Okay.
no, this is a strictly I'll call it a supportive.
We have people that are interested in this.
Yeah, well, yes, right now we do have people that have been doing it as volunteers for the last 2 years. We've had so there are candidates there. Same with our middle school dance coach. She's a community member, and she's been around all 3 years and has done a very good job as a volunteer with those kids.
Will we support this petition or request and move on to the full board?
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, so we'll move that on to the full board. Can we go back to the
Yeah,
drama
like
department?
just kind of over.
Yeah,
Was there another?
After Dave's comment, we moved on quick. It's
Well,
like, I
it's
don't
just-
think we got anywhere.
You're sitting there, I was scrolling through the number of I thought we were gonna be dealing with 3, but I see we're only dealing with 2, and now we got the last one was smaller. I do have one question. What has been the increase in numbers in drama and stuff like that? I mean, it's kind of funny, we saw participation in some of the other ones. What's been the participation in? I know one act has been large and somewhat growing.
Yeah, like the increase from year to year or the,
Just-
well, I would, like this year, how many did you have this year? 40?
We had 47 in one act this year.
What'd you have like 2-3 years ago, 5 years?
I'll be honest, our one act program is the one, it is, I think I can safely say it's the largest one in the state. We have had up to 60 some kids involved. Our lowest was one of my first years here when we got only in the 20s. It has been steady, along those lines. Part of the issue is that, we've been operating with one person, or now it's up to 2, doing multiple jobs that would be broken up in a lot of other activities for years. And in all honesty, I think that I'm kind of looking ahead. I'm thinking, I'm going to eventually retire, and would anybody want the job that I've been doing? Because it's asking a lot.
So this is actually a proposal that can, because right now what we do is we have the one act play, then we swap every other year musical and the play.
Yes.
And what this does is it kind of brings a 3-season aspect to the drama club. So that you would have the one act, the play and the musical every single year.
Yes.
As opposed to having kind of the alternating year. That's generally, I think, part of what you're proposing.
Yes.
And then as you look at that, it has these different additional costs associated with it.
We've had a request,
So-
sorry.
Whether it's Aaron or Rick, I guess I'm confused because I thought that the drama director, you, and the vocal director for the music department, who was ever doing vocal music, were paid for their involvement with the spring pay. But
Those,
so is that what that means? That the ones that are not highlighted,
Yeah, the bold positions would be the
the
new
new
ones.
ones, okay?
So like if you look at spring musical, drama, vocal, and tip, those are existing positions.
Yep.
What we're looking to add are potentially a dance,
Got it.
tech, costume, and an accompaniment. In the spring musical.
How are ticket sales handled as far as the funding and where the money goes, things like that, as towards, do they work towards funding this? Or like football, I mean, we have a very kind of tight policy on how that money moves around. Do we have the same thing here?
So the dollars for the program,
we have, basically, other than the salaries, the musical and the plays have been surviving off their ticket sales. A musical is going to pay like $3,000 to $4,000 for the rights just to do the show right off the bat. And then you've got, all of the other elements of that. And it's basically been our goal to break even in that portion. It's a little bit more challenging to do that when we're trying to pay the choreographer a competitive salary, a costumer some money, and cover, any instruments that we can't handle in the orchestra and stuff like that. But yeah, basically that money, if we come off ahead, we can purchase a few more pieces of equipment for shows that we can use in the future, that sort of thing. But we're living off the ticket sales except for salaries. So we have no budget for.
Do you have any type of outside support, like a booster club type or fundraising or anything like that?
Nope.
I'm sure there are people.
Donate.
Yeah, we
They
can
want-
get some donations on
they
occasion.
Want to, get, to grow the drama program, so there's definitely an interest in the community, but it's there, it's just we don't have a mechanism.
Right. Yeah, I think that would be there too, so.
you know, the number of kids involved, I mean, the one act is so robust. They all, I mean, the number of teams that go up is unbelievable. And some of them are student directed, so I mean, the opportunities for learning is tremendous. The spring play must be, well, depending upon what's vocal or not, you'll have more or less because of the different needs. But again, it's done very well, giving kids lots of opportunities. If this were another program, more in the sporting area, I would believe there'd be almost instant success or support, because when you look at what they're asking for, it's like asking for an assistant coach or something like that, that is critical. And based upon their numbers, so.
Are you seeing this as all three of them being done each year, but their time windows are such that, let's say, take a student who wants to do, could they do all three of them?
Yes.
So is the director going to be the same across the board, the assistant directors across the
It's-
board, or
It wouldn't necessarily be.
wouldn't necessarily be, but could
because
be?
The, if you're directing 3 shows across the year, you're gonna not last as long.
Oh, I was just wondering, one, how hard it's gonna be to get enough students. And, I mean, if it's the same 50 students in every single event, that's kind of limiting. And how hard it's gonna be to fill the positions if you're not using some of the same people. Like right now, most of the same people who do fall one act do this thing in the spring, whichever
be me.
version it is. Yeah.
When
And
you say
mo-
most of the same people.
And a lot of the same students are in both.
Yes,
Right,
But-
so if we put it to 3 and fill the calendar, are we actually offering more opportunities for more students, or is it the same students doing all 3 opportunities? See what I'm saying?
Probably a little of both, Dave. I mean, it's
Yeah.
kind of like, I look at it as, it's kind of like dramas had a, you couldn't be a 3 drama person in a year because we only offer 2. Right, you can have, if you're an athlete, you get, there's a fall, distinct winter, distinct spring opportunities. I think in my mind, that's the one thing that's kind of resonated with me, is it kind of gave you, throughout the different seasons of our year, you have an opportunity for kids to be involved in drama. Are many of those kids going to be the same? Sure. May you get some kids that jump in and out that otherwise might not have, just because of other activities, hopefully. I think that's kind of the goal. Yeah, I kind of like the proposal. Like, the big only concern I have is similar to yours, is making sure that you can have the directors, because that's an intense job, as you said. It'd be like having the same head coach for all 3 seasons. So making sure that you can staff that piece, but from an opportunity piece for kids, it does provide a greater opportunities for kids to participate in more events throughout their time at the high school. Otherwise, they only have 2 events every year.
Mark, I looked at it just the way you did. You know, I see this as if this was any team. We've seen some of the list of how many assistant coaches some of our teams have. I mean, this is covering 3 different sporting seasons.
Right.
If we look at it that way.
That's right.
You know, I support this proposal. You know, I would,
Second motion,
yeah, well, go ahead.
I'll second it.
Okay, I'll make the motion to support this proposal for the 22-23. To take it to full board.
Where do you see the funding for this coming from?
Where do we see the funding?
No, not you, Tim, do one of you have is this a tough number to hit based on where you fund this stuff from now? Or is it?
Where we fund
Not a
it
problem.
now, this would be in addition to the budget. We would have to request additional dollars from the budget.
As you approve it, it would be a piece that we would toss into the budget process, so that we can kind of see where that is.
Okay.
It would go into the
2022.
2023 budget. And that was kind of how we have to roll forward to be part of our salaries budget as they build that out.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, carries to the full board. 3-0 vote. All right, Aaron.
Couple more here, two more, these are new programs. If you go to winter cheer and high school esports, there you go. So just a little background, about approximately 15 years ago, Waunakee did offer a winter cheerleading season. It kind of died out due to lack of student interest. But Sierra Nygren, who is here as our fall football cheerleading coach, there is some interest. We had about 15 to 20 girls express some interest in the idea of doing some winter cheer. And they would focus on doing boys and girls basketball games, and then it would become also a competitive cheer program. So this would be slightly different than what was offered back 15 years ago and what we offer in the fall. The fall, that team is 100% a supportive team, meaning it's just there for the football games. It does the cheerleading at halftime, the cheers at the game, does a halftime routine. This would be sort of that supportive, but it would also have a competitive edge where they would start doing some WACPC cheer competitions.
So what level, where does this fall in? Because it sounds like
It would fall in category A then.
we want to treat it like a new club where we're not paying for the position, yet it's a competitive situation. And whenever we added a competitive activity, with athletics in some way, there's always been a coach hired.
So similar, so again, this was written before that discussion took place. The recommendation that I have is, just like we did with middle school cheer and that I had recommended with mountain biking, is at 3 years then we would look to add a paid position. But with the decision that this group made, or the recommendation this group made regarding mountain bike, I think we would have to also do that for this group too.
So it'd be similar to what Dave talked about when we look at the policy.
Yep.
And the procedural piece. If it's competitive, then it would have some sort of a.
And this
advisor
would,
that-
yeah.
So would we have, so right now we don't have cheerleaders at basketball.
We do not have a winter season for cheer. We only have a fall football season.
Did we used to?
Yeah,
Years
so in the winter, we had a set of basketball cheerleaders and a set of wrestling cheerleaders. This is Rich Hallenbrand's history, so I'm gonna cite my source in case I get something wrong here. But basically what Rich had told me is, was that it just student interest just kind of withered on the vine after, some time. So he said that he thought it was like around 2003, 2005-ish that it went away. Just wasn't the same student interest at the time.
Do we have enough interest to be able to do wrestling, boys basketball?
Well, right now the proposal would just be to do basketball and the competitions. And Sierra's here, so she can talk to a little bit about it. But I'd say you had about 20 kids express interest. We had about a dozen or so, 15 come to the meeting.
Yeah, so I got contacted by basketball coaches and also a hockey mom that expressed interest of having the high school cheerleaders come to a few of their games. But because football cheer follows the football season, we weren't able to fulfill those asks because we fall out of line for the winter season. And like Aaron said, we did have a team 15 years ago, but due to lack of interest, it just didn't become a thing anymore. And because of the increased interest, and then also being able to provide a team sport that would work towards a title versus just a supportive team along the lines of dance team and some of the other winter sports, there's an increased interest of athletes wanting to work towards that common goal. So
How many carryovers would you have from winter tier to,
Um,
or from fall to winter?
Yeah, so because dance team and gymnastics take over the winter season, and some of those creative outlets do take some of our athletes. Pretty much, I would say 70 or 80% of our fall team would carry over to the winter team. And then people who do attend or do the fall sports that don't have the opportunity to also do football cheerleading because they're involved in the fall sports, but they're not involved in winter sports. We've seen probably between 5 and 10 athletes interested also that do a fall sport, but don't have the opportunity to do football cheerleading, would be interested in doing the winter cheerleading team.
In terms of the competition part of it, would a football cheerleader who's not participating in the cheer for the teams be able to participate in the competition?
So like, would there be a differentiation between like people who cheer at like basketball games versus the competition team? Is that what you're asking? Or, because they would be football and winter would be two separate teams. So we would have a separate tryout for the winter season.
For the competition.
For the
season?
competition team. I know some people do, some other schools have a separate competition team and then also a separate team for just doing basketball and like hockey games or wrestling or that such thing. That could be an option just because some people are not interested in cheerleading competitively, but some are interested in being a more supportive team for the basketball or hockey and wrestling team. So that could be an option. Personally, I'm not opposed to either or, just because my idea would be to have just do the home games for girls and boys basketball. That way we wouldn't be using any buses or things like that. And then for competitions, we would ride the bus with like dance team, because we would be going to the same competitions, so we would need any resources that way. And because the basketball area is just a little bit smaller, if our competition team were to be super large, we would only ask like a couple girls to be at each game so that it wouldn't be super overwhelming, if that makes sense.
In simplistic terms, you're just trying to create a cheer team for the winter sports. That would be, it would have three components to it. Girls basketball, boys basketball, those events, and a competition piece. So you create a winter team.
Yeah.
That's really what you're asking for. And right now you have a fall team that only cheers at football. It'd be a fall team that you're creating. I think you've seen growth within the cheer area. You see that with the middle school piece we talked about before. I think if you go back and varsity, probably remember, I think when I started here 14, 15 years ago, the football cheer team was down to like 3 kids. It was waning very quickly. And they built that up over time, and now they built it into the middle school, which is now seems to kind of precipitate now the interest again to offer more opportunities for kids in another season. So I think it makes some sense.
Do you foresee having one squad that you would basically assign a boys or girls game, or would you have a boys cheer team or cheerleading team and women?
I would treat it, I also coach the middle school team for cheer. So I would treat it just like how I treat that. All the girls cheer for, because the middle school team is so small, all our girls cheer at that 7th grade football game. And then the next week they cheer at the 8th grade football game. Because boys and girls basketball kind of fluctuate who's home, depending on like, I think it's like Tuesdays or Fridays. We would just do one home game a week. And those, like, whichever group is up to cheer, then they would cheer the Tuesday girls basketball game. And then next week a group would cheer a Friday boys basketball game. And it would just kind of rotate. Like logistically, because we don't know how many girls we have, because we haven't had tracks or anything like that. We don't know all the logistics in terms of that, but ideally that's kind of how we would run it.
I would just like to avoid having being signed one or the other team.
Yeah.
That conflict.
The other part of that addition of an additional or a new offering, and I just have there in one line. We have some student interest in an esports team. To date, we still have not been able to find an advisor or to kind of run that operation. So, but I just put down for their recommendation is mostly just for your awareness, we have this group. They're still looking for an advisor. I just want to, my recommendation is allow us to bring this back when we have secured an advisor at our next co-curricular meeting, which is typically in February or March. Hopefully by that time, we've been able to find one.
Could anyone in the community be that advisor?
Well, that's our next. So we've
Start
been
opening it up.
looking at staff members, and now he's a junior, Noah Stevens. We had a conversation last week before Thanksgiving break. I think we should start looking outside of the school walls to see if there's maybe somebody in the community that has an interest that might be willing to be an advisor, but we just haven't found that person yet.
I'll only do it as long as they do Assassin's Creed, anything else I'm not.
Well, I will give them your contact because I do not know what games they play.
I get blown up on Call of Duty, I can't stand
That's a
it.
volunteer position.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, I think as long as, I mean, right now, are you looking for a recommendation for them to explore? Or put it for, I guess it's for next year anyway, beginning next year.
Well,
So,
yeah, but technically things are supposed to be in November. I think this is just keeping the door open for them. to
Yeah,
be able to
so-
Start next
Yeah,
year.
it's supposed to be submitted and improved. So that's why I'm just asking to give us some more time with that esports. I think we've got things sort of nailed down with the winter cheer thing. That one I think is ready for recommendation or approval.
I would make a motion to support both recommendations to the full board.
Second.
right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Right, take that to the full board as well.
The last one is position that we're titling the live stream coordinator. So last year, we added live streaming onto our offerings because of attendance limitations at sporting events from public health. So we're looking for a way to stream these games because of those restrictions. Mr. McConaughey's digital comm class, created to maximize sort of the content and control that for the video board. Took that challenge on because it was really the only place we had for it. We pay our student advisors, student workers out of Fund 80 for that. So the camera kids get paid for that position. And our live stream's been super successful. What we really did is we very much underestimated the amount of additional work that was putting on, in this case, Jason McConnell's lap, but it will be whoever is the future digital comm live stream coordinator person. And it's been successful. It's really been a good project, but it has been an awful large amount of work to be able to do that as a volunteer or
You fund this to Fund 80 as a community service.
yeah, this would be paid out of Fund 80 as a community position. I sort of mirrored with talking with Brian Grabarski, the pay scale that we use for I believe it's the PAC position.
No, it's the video board.
Oh, yeah, sorry,
I'm sorry, I'm not using the right term, but it's the video coordinator is
Yes.
who it is. It's the same guy as that, video production coordinator. Sorry.
Yeah, this is different than operating the school board, which is a separate position. This is actually the live stream of the different events that we do.
Yeah,
And they've live streamed a lot of different events, not just the main football games, et cetera. They're doing things throughout throughout the year, is that correct?
Any place that has Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Live stream. So this particular role in it, he coordinates the student workers, make sure that somebody's there. He trains them to what tasks to do. He coordinates who's going to cover the events, make sure that they understand how to make that production, make it worthy of going out to the public. And then he also is the person that approves all the timesheets for our student workers. So it is a tremendous amount of work that he's doing for this. And certainly, as you can see, with 58,000 viewers, it is something that's been well received by everyone.
And I would even add to that 58,000 number, that's screens. You don't know how many people are actually watching that TV screen. So it's been.
So is this just for the football season?
This would be a year-long position that that's the plan.
Yeah, he's so that it's been basketball games, wrestling meets, swim meets. I mean, you name it. If it has, as Brian Borowski said, if it has Wi-Fi that we can patch into to get it on and upload it, we've been live streaming.
In terms of athletics, the only thing we haven't been able to figure out how to live stream is golf matches, basically. Yeah, and tennis. But this was the crew that live streamed graduation. So if you remember those kids that were out on the field there, they've done, like Brian said, almost any and all events that we can have, that you can ask for. We've had some booster clubs actually reach out to Jason about now wanting to pay these kids to, and it's actually something I've talked to Brian about, is pay these kids to actually make highlight videos at the end of the season for the booster clubs, instead of, if you've ever been to some of our games where they pay other people to come in. So it has been it's been a huge success. It's hugely popular, and so
I think this is well worth what it offers as far as being able to reach out, all the people it's reaching, and recognizing the work that goes into doing it. Having it in Fund 80 as community service, that's not an issue at all. So,
Motion to approve the recommendation to the full board.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Uh,
Aye. All opposed?
all right. Now a bit of a
Just put a donate button on it.
well.
Start charging.
It's funny you say that. I've had some conversations with Steve Summers about being able to do some advertising, leveraging sports marketing class and doing some advertising to help actually create. I don't want to say self-fund, because I don't want to say we're going to be able to pay for everything, but then we can start accumulating some dollars. So in 5-7 years, when we need to replace the technology, we're not against searching for those dollars. We've kind of built up a war chest.
yeah, when we improved like the digital marketing class and the digital class that Jason McConnell teaches, that's also part of it, kind of tying it into our marketing department and being able to look at selling ads that would go on to some of the things like the scoreboard. This has just now created a whole new venue of where we could potentially sell different ads, have our students be part of that, and generate some additional revenue. So in the absence of any revenue, it gets funded by Fund 80, which I think is exactly where it belongs. But there's opportunities here to raise some funds as well, particularly as they have to replace equipment, et cetera.
This one just pretty straightforward. High school participation numbers, the middle school participation numbers, again, just strong across the board in terms of the number of athletes we have coming out for events. I always, when people talk to me or ask me, what are your, why are we successful? The number one answer is the kids stay out. We keep the kids out. And the number two answer is they work really hard. Like if you don't have the kids, it doesn't, that's the first thing. Then if you scroll down, it's just, that's just the average GPA of our athletics. I broke out just the fall athletes right there. That all sports one at the bottom, that includes all athletes that are, that includes the winter and spring sports in there, but I just didn't break those out for the fall report. So again, you can see we've, you know, our fall sports, I think our lowest GPA there is a 3.2, which is, I mean, unbelievable. I think if I would have brought that home in high school, my parents would have done cartwheels. So just again, strong academics along with our athletic success too. One of the things I want to point out that's not in there, and I wish I would have pointed it out actually at the football pep rally, the football team, the 100 kids on the football team or whatever it is, they actually received a team recognition because the varsity team's GPA, average GPA was so high. So like, I mean, when you look at 100 kids to have all of them with, you have an average team GPA of, was it 3 point something? That's pretty remarkable. When you've got that many kids, 3.36 of 170 kids. So that's just a sort of just informational stuff. I don't know if there's much more to parse out of that. We can scroll on to the next one.
Well, I just want to make a comment regarding our community listening session. I think this goes to sort of show that, you know, our student athletes are truly student athletes, and they all do a good job in the classroom and work hard to accomplish what they need to out of the classroom. So thank you for bringing that up.
The next one is board policy 370, rule number 2, about middle school eligibility and club sports. Right now, if you're in a club sport, you're not allowed to, that is going on at the same time as the middle school sport. You're not allowed to be a part of the middle school program.
And that's our rule.
That's our rule. So prior to me being here, Waunakee Middle School was WIA affiliated. That's actually very rare. Most middle school athletic departments are not. And that's a WIA requirement of middle school sports. So when you guys de-affiliated, you didn't actually have, so you guys, the board at that time added this language in there because they wanted to keep that. They wanted to have sort of middle school sports clean and not competing against club sports. Just speaking as someone who has kids, but also is looking at our participation numbers, I think it's hurting some of our sports participations. We have kids that are choosing not to participate on our teams because of that rule. At the middle school level, there's still an ability to do both and not have a conflict of interest or time. What I would say, what I'm asking is we strike this language, but I would still put a caveat in the middle school handbook saying, you know, during that period of time, we'd ask that you honor the middle school season first if there are any conflicts. Because what we're looking at is boys basketball is about an 8-week season, girls basketball is about an 8-week season. And we're missing some kids to be a part of that program. I think it's hurting our middle school program.
So our numbers are actually going down? Or are we, because we don't cut at the middle school, correct?
No, we do not.
Okay,
So
'cause that was the one thing. That's the reason why I don't know basketball players in our district. It's because I watched my kids play in middle school. None of those kids play middle school basketball. None of them. And so so I want to make sure we're not pushing the kids that are playing in their last couple of years before high school out.
No, we're not, and we don't cut. One of the reasons I'm bringing this forward is because we've, you know, before COVID, our girls basketball, middle school girls basketball numbers were dwindling to the point where, you know, there was a couple times where we only had one 7th grade team or one 8th grade team because we had some really low numbers because girls were not coming out. And part of the middle school conference we're in, if you do not support all the basketball and the volleyball teams, you get removed from the conference for all those sports. So it's a domino effect to me being able to schedule middle school wrestling, middle school track, middle school cross country. So it's just something I think we need to look at. And I mean, ultimately, I think it's worth the discussion.
How many kids are we talking about? I mean, let's say, for example, you're saying that there's only one team for 7th grade girls basketball.
Well-
If you suddenly opened it up and all the club girls came in, how many do you think you'd be looking at?
Realistically, probably we would have 2 teams per grade for girls. The boys, we may have to have a third team. But, so it's not like it's gonna be this huge number, but it allows me to support the program. So when I'm in my conference scheduling meeting with the Sun Prairie Middle Schools, and I say, Aaron, why are we coming to you? I only get half a game. And that's what I'm worried about is if I don't do something to increase my numbers, and this is an impediment to increasing my numbers at the middle school level, is I'm going to lose out on being able to schedule any of these and sponsor any of these events or teams.
So if we, sounds like to me, in essence, the benefit of changing policy 370.2 would be to allow the kids who are in club sports to come in and not be penalized if they miss a practice because they have a conflicting practice.
Oh, actually, it
No,
blocks them from goes to.
I'm sorry,
The last line says that they have to go to the middle school team. They can't.
but
go to
what
the
part of this
club.
are we changing then?
so right now, they're not allowed to do, they're not, if you are on you have, right now, 7th and 8th grade students, but we'll use basketball just because it's the most kids. 7th and 8th grade basketball players have to decide if they're going to do the BDL season or they're going to do our middle school season. Our middle school season is 6 to 8 weeks long. So if you come out for middle school basketball, per our rules, for those 8 weeks, you can't be on a BDL team. Well, Jeff, your boys, I'm assuming played BDL, and so you can maybe chime in here a little bit, but those teams are set in September and October. And so we don't even get those kids. And
Well,
the families have to decide then whether or not they're doing BDL or if they're going to do the middle school season. And middle school students don't know. I mean, a lot of times at that time, some do, some know which one they want to do, some don't. And so I don't want to shut the door on what I think is a really good program, which is our middle school basketball program, which has some things attached to it that I think are really strong that a lot of 7th and 8th grade kids are missing out on.
if my kids in competitive programming and they miss the first third of their season, what's the likelihood that they're going to be able to play on a team?
So with the way I'm envisioning this rule, we would not prevent them from being on that BDL team. BDL practices don't occur at the same time as middle school practices. BDL games and tournaments don't occur when we're having our games or tournaments. So what it really would be, it would be on that kid to say, hey, Thursday night, if they have a BDL practice Thursday night and we have a game in DeForest, is they're going to have there, we would say, yes, you need to come to the game. We expect you during this 8 weeks, the 6 to 8 weeks, you're going to prioritize that game versus going to your BDL practice. That would be the stipulation I would be putting in as like a handbook.
So basically, we're looking at, it would say middle school students who are participating in non-school sponsored athletic programs, club basketball, are eligible to concurrently play in the middle school sponsored sports. However, your school sponsored sports come first if,
There's a conflict.
but yeah, because then the coach could be like, listen, you chose them over us.
Yeah.
You know, you are now moving down the bench until I feel like, you know, we are right, because everybody else shows.
That's scary as heck.
That is,
Hey,
but
You say you have a hard time now telling if they're playing on a club team or not. and I understand that, yeah, you don't have access to their list. A kid doesn't show up for a practice because they decide to go play a BDL game. You're not gonna know.
Yeah, you
And
will.
then the few,
Because I coached recreational basketball and we had tri-county conflicts and we knew. And I told the kids,
But
that's
then-
fine, we know.
but then what are you gonna do? Say, move them down the bench? Well,
You
what
play
if he's your
somebody
best player? That kid gets to keep playing full time, but then the coach
Well,
holds
the
it against you.
reality
You're not-
is, the middle school program isn't like a club program.
Mhm.
It isn't like, if we went into the WI competitive situation versus, I'll call it an intramural program, where you might have 35 seventh grader boys who are going to share rotation time. And I don't think that's going to appeal to the school. And I mean, we can do it, but I think it's unrealistic. When historically, when this started happening, it was because of frustration at the lack of competitive basketball that these kids were getting. And I can remember having 6 assistant coaches for 7th grade, just because you needed that many to work a practice. That's how many kids you know. Today's numbers might be slightly different. But to me, it wasn't real basketball. As a varsity coach, I was very frustrated with the system. And, you know, basically, it's sort of like having a kid run I'm sorry, muddle brain, a relay team, because you're only going to get a half a lap in the competition, and then someone else is swimming for you. And I don't think you're going to get the club kids back unless it's really going to be a team of 10 or 12, and there's more playing time and it's more competitive.
Well, I think that what you've also found, Mark, and I think what's happened when we've kept this, is other districts have gotten rid of this. So they don't have the same rules. Their club kids do play the BDL tournament on the weekend, and they play middle school during the week. And then when they come to Waunakee, they're playing all the non-club kids. And this was my experience with my kids. Then our kids would get destroyed by 45 points. Because you had kids who really weren't sometimes your best basketball players. They were kids wanting to get that experience. But now we have one team and we're playing the best team from before us, which is a mix of others. And it's just not competitive. And even though it's an experience for the kids, I can't say it's maybe the best. And I think that's part of what you're hoping too, because I think that's still happening.
Yes.
Is that if you can kind of get some more kids involved, kind of spread out some of that talent too, you can kind of be a little bit more competitive, have more kids participate. I mean, when this came through, I was a supporter of keeping that language there. But I think what Aaron is bringing up is now the residual effect of this being in place for a few years, other districts moving away from it, and kind of where it's leaving us. So I'd be supportive of considering it.
How many schools around us are WIA in middle school?
Almost not.
Almost not. So they've all gone to this.
Right now, we're gonna, the way the middle school conference is constituted is different than the high school. Our group, it's ourselves, DeForest, Beaver Dam, and then the 3 Sun Prairie middle schools for basketball. DeForest, all 3 Sun Prairie middle schools, well, going to be 3 Sun Prairie middle schools next year. And Beaver Dam allow this. So we're sending kids that are maybe not like the grannies, that are not club kids, not the most competitive kids, and they're going over to Sun Prairie to play, a very different caliber of kid. I would also say what I think has happened too over the period of COVID is there's a lot of kids and a lot of families that realize because they did all the travel, they did all the club travel, basketball, that did not slow down in the last 2 years. I think it reopened or reawakened them to the importance and the draw of playing for your school team. because I'm, you know, that's just what there's a lot more interest maybe back than there was.
I mean, I think your risk is nothing changes. You change this, the club kids play club, the other kids play this, and it really doesn't change what happens. I think you're gonna get kids who are gonna view this as an opportunity to now be part of their school team, and we'll probably do both. So I support that. And I think you have two options. You can either kind of move that forward out of this committee, or you can move it to the policy committee, and then we can make the revisions per the recommendation out of here, if that's something that the committee would consider.
Yeah, I support the concurrent play. I mean, we did it 30 years ago with baseball. I mean, we played Legion in high school and we had a split because Iowa played summer baseball. So basketball, we played basketball and had AAU. So we had some members of our teams playing AAU as well. You just work around it, you know, and most of the times the coaches who are coaching our school teams know the coaches that are coaching these other club sports too. They have to communicate stuff, you know. I don't know, it's up to the coach how they put it out. I don't know if they'll spread out the talent or if it will be a really strong team and then everybody else that's up, and that will probably cause some ruffles for a couple of years. But as long as we have equal playing time at the middle school for everybody who wants to play, and we have games for them, I'm fine with this. Like I said, I coached my kids all the way up through rec league after middle school ball. I don't know any of our good basketball players in our high school because they didn't ever touch middle school basketball or anything else besides Tri-County and BDF. So I support allowing this. So.
I guess we need a motion and either know kind of what, either you want to, we either change the policy here and move it forward from there, or we move it over to the policy committee for them to review. It could just be a policy, kind of a piece out of here that we recommend to the board out of this committee. That's probably the cleanest.
I'll make a motion to recommend it to the board.
I'll second that. All in favor? Say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Same.
Say.
Almost there.
The next piece,
Discuss it.
so a little background. Per the WIA regulations and bylaws, the WIA is responsible for conference alignment. The WIA is the one who assigns schools to conferences. I want to say about 8 years ago, this became a pretty hot topic. It actually went to the WIA's annual meeting. At that meeting, every school has one vote. Overwhelmingly, the schools voted to keep that power in the WIA's hands. At that time, though, the WIA did redo the process to realign your conference. Now, it used to be a pretty slapdash thing where schools would just send letters to the WIA asking to be moved. Now there's a whole process. One of the additions or one of the supplemental documents was the flow chart. And the deadline for that submission was November 15th. On that date, Monroe has submitted a request to the WIA to move to the Rock Valley Conference. They are currently in the Rock Valley for football. This year was their first year there. Monroe is asking for this relief based on their declining enrollment numbers and their ability to remain competitive and field the teams that the rest of the Badger Conference has. So what I tried to, and the reason it says proposal 1 is because they initially had 2 proposals and they pulled back the second one, and I deleted it, but I didn't change proposal 1. So these are the kind of the bullet points of the school, all the schools that are involved that would be moving conferences. Monroe would go to the Rock Valley. Stoughton would move from what is in now the Badger East, which is what we are in, to the Badger West. Waunakee would move to the Big 8. Beloit Memorial, which is currently in the Big Eight, would move to the Southern Lakes Conference. That is with like Lake Geneva Badger and those schools in that area. Clinton and Broadhead would move to the Capital South, and Delavan Darien would move out of the Southern Lakes and into the Rock Valley with Monroe to take the Clinton Broadhead spots. So I had heard some of this coming forward. I talked with Brian, I've talked with Randy. It's really our position at this time. We see no benefit to Waunakee joining the Big Eight. Right now, and I brought this up, we had meetings as a Badger conference. Our enrollment difference between us, our current size, and the largest school in the Big Eight is greater in terms of percentage than what Monroe is to us, the largest school in the Badger. So if you want to look at, and I said that's one of their main arguments for wanting to move is the enrollment issue. Well, you're now putting us in that position. The Big Eight also doesn't have sort of the academic recognitions and things that we do here in the Badger, whether it's so some of those things. Also, the Big Eight, in terms of some of its scheduling apparatus, that does not recognize Wednesday nights. That would be, I think, something that would upset our ecumenical community here. Monsignor Gunn and the other, pastors in the community would not be real happy, but we would, per the conference schedule, be having games on Wednesday nights. I don't think that fits with our community. So I am going to need to submit an impact and a position statement prior to their conference realignment task force meeting coming up in December. They have not set the exact date yet. Jeremy Schlitz is the athletic director at Madison Memorial, and he is on the WIA's realignment committee. So he's the one, there's about 20 people on this committee. They review these proposals, and they can basically, so I did have a long conversation with him about the process, about what's our best position to kind of state our claim. One of the things I did share with Jeremy is, the one thing I don't like about this whole process is I feel like now you're putting Waunakee in the position of having to solve Monroe's problem in terms of those things. But we did have a meeting as a conference for Monroe to explain why they're making this request. But like I said, their top two reasons: declining enrollment, their ability to field the competitive team. So they're finding that they, no longer have necessarily 3 levels of girls basketball. I'm just using that as an example. I don't know if that's true off the top of my head, but that's where they're finding the struggles. I think they would fit better with the Rock Valley schools, which would be like your McFarland's, East Troy's, those ones.
So this is the actual proposal that's in front of the.
Yep.
And you have to kind of give a position statement from us as far as where we're at.
So the school proposing to leave, can suggest where the other schools go.
Yes. So, and that's, well, and Brian, so that's why I voiced my frustration with the Madison Memorial ADUs on the committee, because now you're basically asking me to solve this problem by throwing all of our names in. Now, the conference realignment task force, when they get a proposal like this, they can do a number of things. It's within their power. They can accept it and move it forward to the board of control, the WI board of control, which is basically their version of a school board. They can make their own adjustments, their own modifications. That's what happened with the football realignment that's going to go on next year. Baraboo and Reedsburg are getting moved out of the Badger small, and they're getting moved to the Mississippi Valley with like the lacrosse centrals and those schools. Or their third option is they can deny it outright. They can just say, no, we're not gonna accept this proposal. Monroe, go back to the drawing board, or So they've kind of got those three different options. One of the many things I submitted there was the flow chart. Basically, there's a meeting in December to make those kind of decisions where we can make our position known. And then after that, in January is sort of when the Board of Control takes it up. I believe in it. Yeah, Board of Control meeting in January. At the Board of Control meeting, they can do really a same thing. They can approve it, they can deny it, they can remand it back to the task force and say, hey, we don't like this part of it. Can you look at X, Y, and Z?
Are
So,
there two proposals for this?
so they had originally had two. They pulled one back.
Okay.
So that's why I had proposal one. I just deleted
Okay,
proposal two, but I didn't change the,
Okay.
I didn't delete the one on proposal one.
Okay.
I'm assuming they're saying the Big Eight just because of football.
Yes.
I mean, that's their main.
Well, but
Well,
Big Eight, I think all of those teams are in for all of the sports.
Yeah.
They don't divide out any sport out
so,
of that league.
so,
So if we went in there, we'd be in for everything, right?
well, no, so football is its own thing. So next year, Sun Prairie East and West are gonna be in the Badger Large for football. Football is treated separately in terms of conference alignment. So we have what's called football only conferences.
Is that in concrete? Because the most recent thing I heard was that Sun Prairie was going to give it 3 years before they split off their football team.
No, they're in for both. I've got, we're their homecoming game for both games.
Okay,
So that's how we're getting welcomed over to Sun Prairie.
all right.
I guess trying to how to state this, I guess I'm just gonna say what I'm gonna say is the reason, my opinion, that they're moving Waunakee out in this current proposal is that gets a lot of support from many of the other smaller Badger schools. Let me say that outright.
Again,
Well, the whole Badger North would support it.
that's what I'm saying. It's,
So your recommendation and what you wanted to bring here was that your
I want,
recommendation is for us to stay in the Badger.
yes, that's our recommendation. That's the position I would like us to take. Talking with Jeremy Schlitz, we are gonna have to write a position paper. It's gonna need to be more like, it's gonna need to be signed by Randy and Joan. And so that's one thing I'm going to be working on, but I also wanted to give you guys the heads up and kind of the timeline, because it's gonna happen fast. December is the meeting, then there's a meeting in January. I mean, it basically becomes finalized in March, so
they
the
need-
next 4
they need
months.
Something signed by Joan and myself, and you'd like this to be something that we take to the board.
Yeah, I think it's just, I think it just needs to be some, I'll call it board education, that this is going on with our high school athletics, and we could be hearing a lot about this.
this would be different if we were sort of thinking of moving around and stuff like that. This is, I agree with you. We need to stay where we are, and that's our,
Well, especially for the sports portion of it. You mentioned somewhere that they don't carry all of the,
They don't do the academic side, recognition side that we've done. The Wednesday thing, maybe it's old fashioned, but I still think that's an important piece.
What do you
to
mean
try
by
and-
academic side? I mean, maybe our academics or whatever are high, which they are, but as far as this proposal, what does our academics have?
So I guess what I'm looking at, we do, as a conference, we do an academic recognition for our top kids. Now, we haven't the last 2 years because of COVID, but it's been something we've done, we bring them in at the PAC, we do those type of recognitions. We have conference forensics, meets, those type of things that aren't supported in the same way in the Big Eight as a conference. We do other things, so
Did we have anything from the economical leaders upset about the ski team being on Wednesday?
no, nothing that's been voiced to me. It's been a pretty long-standing thing, but it's also a very pretty small group of kids. for a short window, the winter season, ski season. This would be the entire school year, all sports.
The ecumenical community, I think, has been understanding as, particularly when we get into spring, when we get to bad weather, we have to schedule things on Wednesdays. As Aaron said earlier, our policy allows for he and I to, for me to make that decision, kind of allow for some of those things. I think the difference is here is this would probably be every Wednesday. This would schedule it out and not be something that we're doing because of
weather.
Now you're scheduling throughout the week regardless of days.
Why does it, so I'm just trying to understand why Waunakee would be different than Sun Prairie about being on Wednesdays. You would think the ecumenical community in Sun Prairie would be upset if there was something to be upset about.
I don't know the answer to that. I think it's more, it goes back to the Badger Conference has stayed consistent as far as those communities to stay away from it, whereas the Big Eight has kind of made more of a policy across that they're not aligned with that. So it just impacts other activities.
Yeah, well, yeah, when on our position, because we're gonna have to just write, I'll call it a position paper. Yes.
And you'll write that before.
I
Board
just would
meeting,
not
right?
include the argument about the ecumenical community, because we haven't heard anything, we don't know anything, we shouldn't say anything like that. If unless they specifically written you a letter saying we're going to be upset about this.
Well, they
I
don't
wouldn't
know-
cite it.
I would
And
say
one,
they-
I don't think as a public institution, we should be citing a religious reason for a participation or non-participation.
Right now, we do have a policy too that states that we stay away from that. But from a policy perspective, we have to change our policy to go as we go into the Big Eight.
And I guess I'm just looking at it in terms of, they also don't even, they're not aware that this is something that's coming up too. So it's part of it.
But to Brian's point, going into the board meeting, you would have the position paper written so that we can share that with the board, so then we can sign off on it.
Is it something you need before? What was the date for
The meeting
their
has been-
meeting in December?
has not been set in December yet. The date hasn't been set.
So ours is what, the 13th? The possibility could happen. It's unlikely now, given the date, that they probably beat the 13th.
Yeah, I mean, potentially, but I would say unlikely.
Okay. All right, if there was a reason to get it out faster, I think you can just email that around.
Yeah.
You and Joan,
Yeah.
email it around just to make sure no one had it judged.
I think that's fair. Otherwise, we'll bring it to the December meeting.
We don't need a motion on that.
I don't think so.
I don't
Let's
think
make it, yeah.
Some discussion, and we'll make sure you put that on there.
Yeah, my goal is to have something for you guys by Monday.
All right, very good.
So future meetings.
Well, we've got one last piece.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Pre-employment required paperwork. This was just
Oh,
a discussion topic Brian wanted, asked me to put on the agenda. So the current pre-employment requirements of the school district and the WIA, actually, some other things there that I should maybe not state it as clearly. So the community school district, it's just the application, the background check, employee payroll paperwork, the concussion acknowledgement form. We have not required additional training or other things like that. Really, sports governing bodies, the WIA, WLF, which is Waunakee Lacrosse Federation. All coaches, volunteer paid, need to watch the rules video, pass the rules exam. WIA, all paid coaches must be certified in CPR, AED, and first aid training. We do that a number of different ways here at the school district. They can either take our school district sponsored training, or if they do another version, they can do, there's online trainings. We have some, like, I'll use Todd Mefford as an example. He's a he's a volunteer firefighter, so he's trained that way. So he just gives us a copy of that certification. Wisconsin Lacrosse Federation also requires something called safe sport training. If you're not familiar, I'm actually trained in it because USA Wrestling requires it when you become a coach for them. Basically, safe sport is a nonprofit entity that was created to basically educate coaches, sports organizations, sports governing bodies on abuse, sexual, whether it's sexual, physical, or emotional abuse and prevention. And teach coaches, one, how to respond to it. These are really something that kind of came out of the issues Penn State had earlier in the decade, and some things that came out of US Olympic training. And unfortunately, even with the safe sport training, it did not, unfortunately didn't prevent everything that happened with US gymnastics. But so those are the basic things that we have. One of the things Brian and I talked about was, even if we did in my previous school district, they used to have to sign off on the 14 legal duties of a coach. If that's something we want to add to that, or if there's some other trainings, but so this was just more of a discussion topic.
Is this something, do they have to sign pre-employment paperwork every year, or how long does our co-curricular contracts go for 1 year?
Yeah, and the stipend or the contract is just the sports season.
Yeah, I guess my thought was to protect the coach and also protect the school district and stuff like that, some type of acknowledgement of, yes, I understand there's a code of conduct, my roles as a coach, that kind of thing, that we keep in file, because I'm assuming you have copies of CPR AED card certifications in their files, and those are updated every year.
Yeah, so the CPR, those certifications, the concussion certificate acknowledgement, the rules, videos, and exams, that's all kept in my office. The other information, that's all kept in the HR office. The other kind of contracts, paperwork.
Are there things that you'd like to add to what we already do right now, or are you
I think I think there is some legitimacy to the idea of maybe signing off on a code of conduct. I think there is, and I've reached out to a few other schools. If they do anything, whether it's the safe sport training or anything similar, and that I'm still kind of, I don't have a good handle on what some other schools do yet. I had a conversation today, the other day, with the Baraboo athletic director, and he has some of that stuff that they do for the Baraboo school district.
So they don't sign off on a job description or anything like that every year to say, here are your responsibilities and duties to the students, the district,
No, that's in the coach's handbook, and after it's approved by the school board and at the July meeting, I share it out with all our, because that's when the head coaches are approved. I share that with them and say, this is the coach's handbook. These are, and in there it does have the job description of the coach.
So,
maybe
so
there's-
even just an acknowledgement that you've received the handbook every year.
A statement that says they've read and understand the coach's handbook and the student conduct handbook, so that they know what their players are supposed to be on their eligibility.
It's more for us and more for our district to protect themselves. If something comes up, an accusation comes up, that you've done your due diligence to say, they've read this thing, you've covered any changes in it with them.
So the coach acknowledges that he understood that they can only play for 8 semesters.
That's right. Won't go there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, I think that was part of it. Like, that was kind of a discussion Brian and I had last week.
So right now, don't all the head coaches have to do Title IX training?
Right now, they do not. And
I'm sorry, Title IX.
Title IX.
Title IX, I'm sorry.
it is some, we do have those discussions.
I thought I read that somewhere in our documents. So
No, they do not. It's part of it is it's one of those things where if we're talking about Title IX, like when I'm thinking Title IX, I'm thinking of practice facilities, things like that. if you're just the boys basketball coach, it's not necessarily under your purview. But if you're, I've had to have this conversation before with our previous girls basketball coach, because he didn't teach in the district. So, well, it's just easier for me to have a way to practice. You can't have a way to practice every time, because that is actually a potential Title IX issue, because the prime position, the prime practice would be right after school. And so I understand it's convenient for you because of your travel, but we can't create our own Title IX issue. Same with, well, I just want to practice after school every day. I'm just going to have the girls go over to the middle school and practice. You can't do that. So those are conversations you kind of have as they come up in those issues. When we talk about Title IX in terms of discrimination, assault, and those procedures, that is something even outside of my knowledge base. That's not something I would feel comfortable. That would be something where I'd have to pull in Brian Kowarski, who is our Title IX coordinator, to address those.
Some of our individual situations we've heard that dealt with athletics in the past X years, I just think it would be helpful and essential for all of our coaches to have some kind of training in the abuses, harassment of whatever type it is, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's like that physical proper conduct,
Right. And what do you do when you hear about when you witness it?
Yeah, and
They
because
should be recorded, and I'm not saying they're not, but I think for everyone to know what the responsibility is and to get in a situation, because more and more of that is happening.
and being able to identify it. I mean, that's one of the things you learn from that USA Gymnastics situation, is being able to identify it. And it's definitely something I think we need to consider, because I can see coming up, and I don't know how fast it will come, but there are more female wrestlers than ever before. It's been a long time since I've been a wrestling coach. And that is a sport where the coaches actively participate with the kids. So it's definitely something that we're going to have to discuss and talk about. And there's definitely a training we should be exploring on how to get that to our coaches, deliver that, because that's always the biggest challenge with coaches. One, there's a ton of turnover, especially at the assistant level, but when they're not on staff, getting them into the building for meetings is always a challenge.
So I guess that doesn't need a motion, but I just wanted to bring it up for a discussion and see if you guys agreed that just some acknowledgement that we've read the handbooks and student conduct or codes as well. So, so you have that to back you up, and we have it as a district to back us up if something ever comes down. And they've been told, they've been taught. So, okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Can I get one? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion adjourned. Thank you.
everybody. Thanks, Aaron.
Oh, I'm not, thank you for the veterans.
Oh, you're welcome.
That's,